It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Hmm.
Thinking that these ideas, like thousands of years old,
Yeah.
can still actually offer real guidance for navigating life today. When we hear Stoicism, maybe, I don't know, we picture someone totally emotionless.
Like a statue.
Right. But digging into it, you pretty quickly realize it's much more practical than that, much more alive.
Absolutely. And the historical Stoicism, I mean, it was this huge system, right? But what's really interesting now is how its most practical bits are having this kind of resurgence.
Hmm.
There's this whole modern movement really focusing on how to apply these old insights to, the specific pressures and, well, chaos of the 21st century.
And that's exactly what we're diving into here. We've got this stack of sources, articles, research findings, even notes about specific organizations and practices
Right.
to really try and figure out what this modern stoicism thing is all about. What
Yeah.
is it today? How are people actually using it? And like, why is it clicking so much with folks who are looking for maybe some clarity, purpose?
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, right at the core of this is this group, like explicitly called modern stoicism. And it's a really interesting mix. You've got academics working right alongside psychotherapists.
Okay.
So it's not just about, dusting off ancient texts. It's really trying to bridge that gap, take the philosophy and apply it with modern psychological understanding.
And it sounds like they're really active. The sources mentioned they run free online courses.
Yeah, exactly. The big one is Stoic Week. That happens every October. And then there's SMRT, that's Stoic Mindfulness and Resilience Training,
Right.
which is a bit longer, a 4-week course.
And looking at the calendar notes here, Stoic Week 2025 starts October 27th. And their main conference, StoiCon, is October 18th. Plus, they encourage these local StoiConX events, too. Yeah. And what really jumped out at me from the research findings they mentioned, they're not just teaching this stuff, they're actually measuring if it works.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, studies they did with people taking part in Stoic Week and SMRT, they found that consistent practice does seem to make a difference. It led to, like, a measurable drop in negative emotions
Wow.
and an increase in life satisfaction overall. So it gives it some, real weight.
That's powerful. Ancient ideas, but backed by modern data. And for keeping up with it all, there's the Stoicism Today blog.
Right, that's a big one.
Hmm.
The notes say it started back in 2012. Patrick Usher started it, and Greg Sadler's been the editor since 2016.
Okay.
And it seems like a major online hub, covering all sorts of current topics from the basics, like what Stoicism is, to more unexpected things like Stoicism animals. Shows how broad the interest is.
So modern Stoicism as an idea then, separate from the organization.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's pitched as really accessible, practical.
Yeah. Exactly. It's sort of designed to fit into our busy modern lives.
Mm.
The goal isn't really historical expertise.
Right.
It's more about finding clarity, getting some structure, and guiding you towards being, your best self right now, today.
That feels like a key point. One source really stressed that this isn't primarily about, say, becoming a scholar of ancient Rome or debating the fine points of their metaphysics or theology.
No, exactly. It's about cutting to the useful bits, finding those simple guiding principles that can actually help day to day.
Well-
Like the dichotomy of control, figuring out what you can influence versus what you can't, and focusing your energy there. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And premeditatio malorum, thinking ahead about potential problems. These aren't just abstract ideas. The sources frame them as, like, actual tools for building resilience.
And I saw this mentioned, too, this kind of liberating idea. You don't have to swallow the whole thing whole. You
Yeah.
can explore it and just take what really clicks with you, what feels useful, leave the rest.
Which makes sense because, when you look around, you can see these core Stoic virtues: courage, temperance, wisdom, justice, playing out in people's lives today.
Even if they don't call themselves Stoics.
Exactly. The source gives some great examples.
Like Yeonmi Park, the North Korean defector. Her story is just incredible courage.
Unbelievable courage. And then there's Josh Dubin, the lawyer with the Innocence Project, that's pure justice in action,
Yeah.
fighting for people wrongly convicted.
Yeah.
Or Master Shi Hongyi, the Shaolin Buddhist, demonstrating temperance through that incredible discipline.
Right.
And William McCaskill, who we'll talk more about, with effective altruism, combining wisdom and justice in a very modern way.
It's interesting, though, the source that brought up these examples also kind of acknowledged, well, that maybe some purists might argue about, including people who don't explicitly identify as Stoic.
It's probably that debate.
But it does make the point that these aren't just, dusty old concepts. They're accessible.
It shows they're alive in how people act, label or no label.
Yeah.
You can tap into these ideas regardless of your background.
So bringing it back to the individual,
Hmm.
there's this core idea that seems to run through it all, going way back to Socrates. Know yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And in modern Stoicism, as these sources describe it,
Yeah.
that means really taking the time to figure out what's truly important to you. It's less abstract philosophy, more like a practical job.
Like identifying your core values.
Exactly, setting aside time to clarify them.
There was that specific example in one article, right, where the author figured out their number one priority was their family's health and peace.
Hmm.
And number two was making the world better somehow. They'd actually done the work to know that.
And the material suggests that's really key for a modern Stoic, having that internal clarity, knowing your values, your priorities. It's like your compass.
Okay, so we've talked about what it is, the core ideas. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. How do you actually do it?
Right.
How do you put it into practice? The sources seem to shift here from inner clarity to actual action and building resilience.
Exactly. And one really practical application they discuss is in doing good, connecting wisdom and justice through this thing called effective altruism.
William McCaskill's work, you mentioned.
Yeah, his book, Doing Good Better, is highlighted. The basic idea is using data, evidence, almost like economics,
Okay.
to figure out where your time and money can have the absolute biggest positive impact,
Yeah.
maximizing the good you do.
And there was that kind of counterintuitive example, wasn't there, about working for a nonprofit versus something else?
Yeah, the earning to give idea.
Yep.
It suggests that sometimes, depending on your skills and the situation, the most effective way to help might not be working directly for a charity,
Uh-huh.
but maybe getting a high-paying job and donating a significant chunk of that income to the most effective charities globally, those that save the most lives per dollar, for instance.
Oh, okay. But with the caveat that it depends, right? On skills, context.
Oh, absolutely. It's very context-dependent. But it challenges you to think beyond the obvious ways of helping. It's applying that stoic reason and sense of obligation to make the world better in perhaps non-obvious but highly impactful ways.
Okay, so that's external action. What about building that inner strength? Mental fortitude, resilience. The sources talk about stress inoculation.
Yeah, that's a big theme. Cold exposure comes up, things like cold showers, ice baths.
Right, I've heard about that.
Well, it has links to ancient cynicism. The modern angle here is using that controlled physical stress to build mental toughness,
Ah.
to increase your tolerance for real-world stress. The sources mention possible physical benefits too, like inflammation, but the main focus seems to be using it to, like, inoculate yourself against stress, train your mind.
But they do add a note of caution, right? Check with a doctor.
Oh yeah, definitely. Always sensible advice before starting something like that.
And rigorous exercise is framed similarly, as another form of controlled stress.
Exactly. Like pushing yourself through a tough set of burpees or whatever. Your body adapts, but so does your mind. It learns to handle difficulty
So choosing discomfort in a controlled way.
to make you stronger when discomfort chooses you. That's the idea.
And there's this really interesting connection made to modern psychology, specifically CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
That's right. Apparently, Aaron Beck, who was key in developing CBT, drew inspiration from ancient philosophies, including Stoicism, as mentioned in the sources.
And they share techniques like decatastrophizing. What's that exactly?
It's basically about reframing bad events in plain, factual language. So instead of, oh my God, I lost my job, my life is ruined,
Right, the spiral.
you just state the facts. I lost my job. Okay, now I need to find another one, stripping away the catastrophic thinking.
It sounds like the difference between asking what if in a panicked way
Yeah,
and asking so what? Like, okay, so what if this happens? How would I handle it?
exactly. It prompts you to think through the negative outcome, look at your resources, your strength, and realize, you'll probably manage. You'll likely be okay.
It connects back to that Marcus Aurelius quote, doesn't it? The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts.
Precisely. Your internal narrative, how you frame things, it shapes everything. Your resilience, your experience.
And cultivating that internal landscape. That involves self-reflection too, right?
Yeah.
Journaling, meditation.
Yeah, the sources definitely mention those. Using journals, meditating, or just carving out some quiet, distraction-free time to think things through.
But it's not just about looking inward, is it?
No, and that's crucial. The materials emphasize that this isn't purely a solitary journey. Modern Stoics, as described here, also see the value in seeking external guidance.
Like therapy.
Yeah, seeing a psychiatrist or therapist is mentioned as a totally valid, even effective form of self-inquiry, part of taking care of your mental health.
Okay.
And also seeking out teachers or mentors, recognizing that, we all have blind spots and other people can help us see them.
That feels like a really important balance. Self-reflection, but also knowing when to get outside perspective.
Definitely. Now, with all this stuff available, especially online,
Hmm.
the sources do raise a flag about a potential pitfall.
Which is?
Confusing reading about Stoicism or, liking Stoic memes online.
The Broicism trap.
Kind of, yeah. Confusing consumption with actual practice.
Right.
The material's pretty clear. Being a Stoic isn't just about knowing the quotes. It's about thinking, speaking, and, crucially, acting like one.
Putting it into action.
Yeah. Which often means, regularly disrupting your own comfort zone, pushing yourself a bit, usually for some greater good, not just passively consuming content.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's worth just remembering how different our world is from ancient Rome or Greece.
Oh, massively different. The constant connection, the information overload, the nonstop marketing.
Yeah.
The context is different, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But what's fundamental that seems remarkably similar. The sources really point to this idea of reverence of character
Reverence of character.
as maybe the most vital concept for navigating today.
That core ancient Stoic idea that your character, your moral compass, how you act is the only thing that's truly good or bad in itself.
Exactly. And the implication for us, now according to this material,
Mm-hmm.
it's this obligation to treat the ingredients of your character, your thoughts, your words, your actions, as really serious business.
Not things to be careless about.
Right. Not things to compromise lightly.
So what does this all mean then, bringing it all together?
Well, I think it means that inside this ancient philosophy, there's this surprisingly practical, really accessible toolkit. And it feels especially relevant for the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
Modern Stoicism, as we've seen it described,
Mm-hmm.
it offers principles, it offers practices,
Mm-hmm.
ways to help you find clarity, build that mental toughness.
Define what actually matters to you.
Exactly. And then act effectively, ethically in what's, let's face it, a pretty complicated world.
Like a framework for consciously building who you are.
That's a great way to put it. And, when you think about our modern world,
Mm-hmm.
with a constant connectivity, social media,
Mm-hmm.
our thoughts are always being influenced, our speech and actions are more public than ever before.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, how consciously are you tending to the ingredients that shape your character?